Millionaire single dad follows his daughter's nanny and is shocked by what he discovers. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have believed in you, this story is for you. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever had to start over from nothing? Let's get into it. The morning Kara Simmons walked into Hargrove's, a mid-tier family diner on the corner of Maple and 5th in Columbus, Ohio. She was wearing her only clean blouse and carrying a resume she had printed at the public library because her home printer had died 3 weeks ago, and she hadn't been able to afford a new ink cartridge. She was 22 years old, 5'4", with dark circles under her eyes that foundation couldn't quite cover, and a smile she had practiced in the bathroom mirror that morning until it looked almost natural. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease and something vaguely sweet, maple syrup, maybe, or the remnants of someone's pancake order. It was a Tuesday in early March and the breakfast rush had just ended. A few booths were still occupied, an old man reading a newspaper, a young mother trying to keep her toddler from upending a glass of orange juice, 2 women in scrubs who looked like they'd just finished a night shift and hadn't yet decided if they were happy about it. Kara approached the counter and asked for the manager. The woman who came out from the kitchen was named Deb, mid-50s, graying hair pulled back in a bun, an apron that had clearly seen better decades. She looked Kara up and down with the practiced efficiency of someone who had hired and fired more waitstaff than she could remember. Experience? Deb asked, taking the resume without looking at it. 2 years at the Sunset Grill in Dayton, Kara said, and before that, I helped run the front of house at my aunt's cafe in Zanesville. Deb finally glanced at the paper. References check out? Yes, ma'am. You available weekends? Every weekend. Deb looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that strips a person down to what they actually are, rather than what they're trying to present. Then she nodded once, folded the resume, and tucked it into her apron pocket. 6 a.m. start. Don't be late. That was how Kara Simmons became a waitress at Hargrove's Diner on a Tuesday in March for $9.40 an hour, plus whatever tips she could earn. She didn't know, walking out of that diner with something tentative and fragile stirring in her chest, not quite hope, but adjacent to it, that a man had been sitting in the corner booth the entire time, that he had watched the whole exchange, that he had noted the way her hands had trembled slightly when she handed over the resume, that he had observed the micro-expression of relief that crossed her face when Deb tucked it into her pocket. His name was Nathan Hale. He was 35 years old. He was worth approximately $4.2 billion, and he had been coming to Hargrove's Diner every Tuesday morning for 3 years because it was the one place in Columbus where nobody knew who he was. Nathan Hale was not a man who looked like what he was. That was intentional. He drove himself to appointments in a 7-year-old Volvo. He wore clothes that were expensive only if you knew exactly what to look for. No logos, no flash, nothing that announced itself. His watch was a simple Seiko he had bought at 19 with his first real paycheck, and he had never replaced it despite being able to purchase a small island if the mood struck. He kept his hair short and his expression neutral, and he had cultivated the particular art of being overlooked in rooms that should have noticed him. This was not modesty, it was strategy. Nathan had built his fortune, initially in algorithmic trading, then in a series of private equity investments that his competitors had dismissed as reckless, and that had subsequently made him obscene amounts of money, on the principle that the most dangerous person in any room was the one no one was paying attention to. He watched, he listened, he calculated, listened. And then, very quietly and very precisely, he acted. He had been a single father for 4 years. His daughter, Lily, was 6 years old and had her mother's eyes, wide, dark, and capable of communicating an astonishing range of complex emotion without a single word being spoken. Her mother, Elena, had left when Lily was 2, not because she was a bad person, but because she had realized with painful honesty that she was not capable of being what either Nathan or their daughter needed. She had moved to Portland. She sent birthday cards. She called on holidays. It was a civilized arrangement, and it was deeply insufficient, and Lily had never once asked about it directly, which Nathan found more heartbreaking than any question she might have raised. Lily was, by any measure, an extraordinary child. Not in the prodigious, headline-generating sense. She wasn't composing symphonies or solving advanced mathematics. But she was observant in a way that unnerved most adults, possessed of an emotional intelligence that could silence a room, and she had inherited her father's gift for seeing through performance to the thing underneath. She had also, in the 4 years since her mother left, become quietly and absolutely devoted to maintaining the world as she understood it, small, controlled, safe, and she regarded any disruption to that world with a wariness that manifested as perfect, polished distance. She had, in the past 2 years, driven away 3 nannies, not through tantrums, not through disobedience, through observation, through patience, through small and perfectly calculated acts of resistance that wore people down without ever giving them a clear target. She was 6 years old, and she was already, in her own way, her father's daughter. The current nanny, a competent, pleasant woman named Margaret, who had lasted 14 months, which was a record, had given notice 2 weeks ago. Family reasons, she said, and Nathan believed her because he had seen the exhaustion in her face that had nothing to do with Lily and everything to do with circumstances beyond anyone's control. He had a list of candidates, he had a process. He was not worried. He had a process for these exact situations, and it had never once failed him. But he was sitting in Hargrove's on that Tuesday morning, thinking about what he looked for in a person. Not a nanny specifically, but a person, and he had watched Kara Simmons walk in and ask for a job with her trembling hands and her practiced smile, and something had snagged in him the way a loose thread catches on a nail. He couldn't have said what it was. Not yet. He left a 20 under his coffee cup and walked out into the March cold, and didn't think about it again. Or told himself he didn't. The truth was that Nathan Hale thought about almost everything. The truth was that a girl with trembling hands and a smile she had practiced in the mirror was exactly the kind of detail that lodged itself in his mind and refused to leave quietly. He had a meeting at 2, a conference call at 4. Lily had a school recital on Thursday that he had already arranged to attend. He attended everything he possibly could, which his board considered eccentric and his daughter considered simply expected. He had a full life, a disciplined life, a life constructed with the same precision he brought to his professional decisions. He did not think about Kara Simmons. He thought about her for the next 6 days. On the following Tuesday, he arrived at Hargrove's at his usual time, and she was there. She moved through the diner with the careful efficiency of someone who had done this long enough to know how to carry 4 plates without spilling and take 3 orders simultaneously while maintaining eye contact with each customer in turn. She smiled at the old man with the newspaper. She brought the women in scrubs their coffee before they asked. She cut the toddler's pancakes into smaller pieces while the young mother was distracted, and did it so smoothly that neither mother nor child noticed it had been done. Nathan noticed. He ordered his usual black coffee, eggs over easy, wheat toast, and watched, and did not examine too closely why he was watching. She came to his table at the end when the other customers had been attended to. "Sorry for the wait," she said, and her voice was steady, and her hands this time were not trembling. "No problem," he said. She wrote down his order without looking at the notepad. He noticed that too, and moved back toward the kitchen, and he thought, there it is again, that thing he couldn't name. He returned the following Tuesday, and the one after that. He was, he told himself, simply a man who liked routine. And then, on the 4th Tuesday, he came in to find the diner understaffed. "A flu going around," Deb explained to someone on the phone while simultaneously managing the register. And Kara was handling 6 tables alone, and she was doing it well. And there was a moment when she set down a plate in front of a man who had been rude to her twice, and she straightened up and met his eyes with a look of such composed, quiet dignity that Nathan felt something shift in his chest like a tectonic plate. He finished his coffee. He left $40 under the cup. He walked to his car. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and texted his assistant. "Find out everything you can about a Kara Simmons. Approximately 22. Currently working at Hargrove's Diner on Maple and 5th in Columbus." He sat with the discomfort of what he'd just done for a long moment. Then he started the car and drove to his 11 o'clock. He didn't know yet what he would find. He didn't know that what he would find would change everything. Not just about Kara Simmons, but about a betrayal that lived much closer to home than he had ever imagined. He didn't know that his daughter, Lily, was already watching from a place none of them could see, quiet, measuring, deciding. The file Nathan's assistant sent him was 43 pages long. This was not unusual. Marcus was thorough to the point of mild compulsion, which was why Nathan paid him extremely well. What was unusual was that Nathan read all 43 pages in a single sitting, on a Wednesday evening in his home office while Lily was asleep down the hall, and by the end of it he was sitting very still in the way he sat when something had genuinely surprised him, which did not happen often. Kara Elizabeth Simmons, born September 14th, Columbus, Ohio. Parents: Robert Simmons, deceased, cardiac event 7 years prior, and Judith Simmons, now residing in a memory care facility in Westerville, diagnosed with early onset dementia 2 years ago at 57. No siblings, high school diploma, Columbus Public School System. 1 semester at Columbus State Community College, withdrawn for financial reasons. Current address: a studio apartment on the east side, rent $1,200 a month. Previous address: the same apartment but listed under a different name, Elena Marsh, for 8 months prior to Kara's name appearing on the lease. The name snagged. Nathan read it again. Elena Marsh. Then he turned back to the employment section. Kara had worked at the Sunset Grill for 2 years, as stated on her resume. Before that, and this was not on her resume, she had worked for 22 months as an executive administrative assistant at a company called Meridian Capital Partners. This was notable because Meridian Capital Partners was a mid-size private investment firm based in Columbus, and Nathan knew the name because 3 years ago, he had been approached about a potential acquisition that had ultimately gone nowhere, and he had, in the course of evaluating that possibility, learned a great deal about Meridian's internal structure, including the names of its senior partners. He read the next section. The circumstances under which Kara had left Meridian Capital Partners were not listed in any employment database because she had never filed a formal complaint, and her departure had been handled, the word appearing in a sealed civil court record that Marcus had obtained through channels Nathan preferred not to examine too closely, as a confidential settlement. The terms were sealed, but Marcus had included a note at the bottom of page 27, written in his precise, slightly formal style. Subject signed a non-disclosure agreement as part of settlement. Settlement amount not available. However, based on timing and circumstantial documentation, I believe this relates to an incident in October, 3 years ago, involving a senior employee. I have flagged the name for your attention given possible overlap with your existing professional network. Nathan turned to the flagged page. He read the name. He read it again. He set the file down on his desk, very carefully, and looked at the wall for a long moment. The name on the page was Daniel Reeves, and Daniel Reeves was currently a senior partner at a venture capital firm called Forefront Capital, the same Forefront Capital that had partnered with Nathan's own firm on 2 investments in the past 18 months, and whose managing partner had been at Nathan's home for dinner 6 weeks ago. Nathan did not react visibly. This was, at this point, essentially reflexive. Years of boardroom discipline had made his face a surface that revealed only what he chose to reveal. But inside, something very cold and very precise was moving, the way a glacier moves, slowly, with enormous force and with the eventual, inevitable capacity to reshape everything in its path. He opened his laptop. He began, quietly and methodically, to pull every thread he could find. He worked until 2 in the morning. Then he closed everything, checked on Lily, asleep on her side, one arm around the small stuffed rabbit named Chester that she would die rather than admit she still needed, and went to bed. He did not sleep for a long time. The following Tuesday, he went back to Hargrove's. Kara was there. She looked tired, the kind of tired that a single day off doesn't fix, the kind that accumulates over months of early shifts and late nights, and a life that doesn't leave much room for restoration. But when she brought his coffee, she set it down with the same care she brought to everything, and she asked if he wanted the usual, and he said yes, and she nodded and moved away. And Nathan watched her and thought about everything he now knew that she didn't know he knew, and felt something that was adjacent to guilt. He had not yet decided what to do with the information. This was unusual for him. Nathan was not a man who sat with indecision. His professional reputation was built on the speed and precision of his decision-making, on his capacity to assess a situation and commit to a path without the friction of doubt. But this was different. This wasn't a market position or an acquisition target. This was a person who had, for reasons he was only beginning to understand, rebuilt her life in the smallest and most effortful way possible, from executive assistant to waitress, from a settled address to a studio apartment under someone else's name, from whatever she had been before to the woman carrying 4 plates across a diner floor with quiet, absolute precision. What had happened to her was not his story to unfold. She had chosen, apparently, not to unfold it publicly, and he had to respect that even as everything in him wanted to move, to act, to correct, to pursue with the cold efficiency he brought to every injustice that crossed his path. He needed more time. He needed, more specifically, a reason to keep watching. A reason that was not surveillance and not intrusion, and something he could justify to himself when he looked in the mirror. The reason arrived, as reasons sometimes do, not through calculation but through coincidence. On the last Thursday of March, Margaret, the outgoing nanny, still working out her notice period, called Nathan at 3 p.m. to tell him she had tested positive for strep throat and could not pick up Lily from school. Nathan was in a meeting with 3 European investors and a translator, and a set of documents that required his signature within the hour. He did what he always did in moments of genuine logistical impossibility. He called the backup. The backup did not answer. He called the secondary backup, same result. He looked at his watch. Lily's school let out in 41 minutes. He excused himself from the meeting, got in the Volvo, and drove to Columbus Academy, and was there when the doors opened at 3:30, and Lily came out with her backpack and her expression of careful composure that she wore in public like a second uniform. She saw him and something shifted in her face, not a smile exactly, but a softening that was its own kind of thing. "You came," she said. "I came," he said. They drove home. Lily sat in the back seat. She insisted on the back seat, had since she was 4, which Nathan had eventually stopped questioning, and looked out the window and said, without preamble, "Margaret isn't coming back, is she?" It was not a question. "No," Nathan said, "because of the strep throat." "The strep throat is new, but no, she'd already decided." A pause. The city moved past the windows. "Are you going to find someone else?" Lily asked. "Yes." Another pause. Longer. "I don't want someone else," Lily said, in the tone she used for statements of fact. "I know," Nathan said. He didn't say anything more. Neither did she. They understood each other, the two of them, with the particular wordless fluency of people who have spent years in close proximity and learned to read the silences between sentences. What he did not say, what he was not yet ready to say, even to himself, was that he had been thinking for the past 2 weeks about a woman named Kara Simmons, and that the thinking had not yet resolved into anything as clear as a decision, but that it was moving in a direction. He put out a new listing for a nanny the following day. He specified experience with children 6 to 8 years old, flexibility of schedule, and excellent references. He used a reputable agency. He received 41 applications within 72 hours. He read all of them. He called none of them. Instead, on Tuesday morning, he went to Hargrove's. And he sat in his usual booth and he watched Kara work the morning shift, and at the end, when she came to clear his table, he said very casually, as if the words had just occurred to him, "Do you happen to know anyone looking for childcare work? I have a daughter. Her nanny just left." Kara looked at him for a moment. It was the look of someone quickly running calculations. "What age?" she asked. 6, he said. Something moved across her face. He couldn't read it precisely, and he was good at reading faces. "I might," she said. Know someone. She moved away. He didn't press. He left his usual tip and walked out into the April morning, and told himself he was simply leaving a door open. He was beginning to understand, in the way you understand things you have known for some time but have not been willing to name, that the door was already open, and that the question was not whether she would walk through it, but what would happen when she did. And in the booth across the diner, the one Kara had not noticed because she was already moving to the next table, a small figure in a school uniform was sitting very still. Lily had come with her father this morning. She had said she wanted a hot chocolate, which was true but not the whole truth. She had watched the exchange between her father and the waitress. She had watched her father's face, the careful, controlled face she knew better than she knew her own. And she had seen the thing he was not showing. She understood, with the particular intelligence of a child who has survived by watching, what it meant. She said nothing. She drank her hot chocolate. She thought about it all the way to school, sitting in the back seat, looking out the window, and she made a decision of her own, which she did not share with her father, and which would cost them both a great deal before it was finished. The agency sent a woman named Patricia Cole, 53, experienced impeccable references from 3 families in the Dublin area of Columbus. And Lily shook her hand with perfect politeness, and then proceeded to be so exquisitely well-behaved for the next week and a half that Patricia reported to Nathan that she had never worked with a more delightful child. Nathan thanked her. He knew his daughter. He watched and waited. On the 11th day, Patricia arrived at the house to find that every single one of Lily's library books had been returned, overdue, generating a fine, without Lily having mentioned this to anyone, meaning Patricia was responsible for a trip she hadn't known about, a fine she hadn't anticipated, and an afternoon schedule she had to rework entirely. Lily explained when asked that she had thought Patricia knew, and the explanation was offered with such complete sincerity that there was genuinely nothing to say. Patricia Cole put in her notice the following Monday. Nathan received the call in the middle of a video conference. He thanked Patricia. He turned back to the conference. He did not show anything on his face. That evening, he made grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner, Lily's stated preference, and one of the 4 things he made reliably well. And they sat at the kitchen island together. And he said, "Patricia is leaving." "I heard," Lily said. He looked at her. She was cutting her sandwich into precise triangles, not looking up. "The woman from the diner called," he said, which was not quite true. Kara had texted the number he had left through an intermediary in response to a posting she had found, but was close enough. "She's interested in the position." Lily's hands paused for exactly 1 second. Then she continued cutting. "The waitress?" she said, with a neutrality so complete it told him everything. "Yes." "Why would a waitress want to be a nanny?" "People have many skills," Nathan said. "The jobs they're doing aren't always the only jobs they could do." Lily considered this. "Is she qualified?" "She has experience with children, good references, and she seems like someone who pays attention." Lily looked up at him then. It was the look she used when she was taking a reading, measuring, precise, unhurried. "Okay," she said finally. Nathan waited. "What?" Lily said. "I thought you might have more to say about it." Lily picked up half her sandwich. "I'll decide when I meet her," she said, and took a bite. And the subject was apparently closed. Kara came for the interview on a Saturday morning in late April. Nathan had deliberately scheduled it on a day when Lily had no activities, no school, no classes, no reason to be anywhere except present in the house, because he believed that the most accurate reading of any situation came from observing it under the most natural possible conditions. He answered the door himself. She was wearing a neat blouse and dark pants, and her hair was pulled back, and she had done her makeup in a way that was careful without being elaborate, and she was standing very straight with her hands at her sides, not clasped, not fidgeting, in the posture of someone who had learned to occupy space in a way that made no demands on anyone. "Mr. Hale," she said. "Ms. Simmons," he said. "Come in." He had expected some recognition, a flicker of acknowledgement that they had spoken at the diner. There was none. She had decided, apparently, that they were beginning fresh, and that the diner version of himself was either irrelevant or had not registered. He found he respected this. He showed her the house, not a tour designed to impress, just a practical walkthrough of the spaces that would be relevant. The kitchen, Lily's room, the play area, the backyard. She asked questions that were specific and practical. Lily's routine, her dietary preferences, her school schedule, what she liked and what she didn't, the emergency protocols, any medical considerations. Nathan answered all of them. He did not mention that he already knew considerably more about her than the situation suggested he should. At the end of the walkthrough, they came back to the living room, and Lily was sitting on the couch reading. She had been reading when they left, and she was reading when they returned, which was physically possible but chronologically implausible. She had not turned a page. "Lily," Nathan said, "this is Ms. Simmons." Lily looked up from the book. She looked at Kara with the full weight of her attention, which was considerable, and said, "Hello." "Hi, Lily," Kara said. Her voice was warm but not effusive, no performance of enthusiasm, no exaggerated friendliness. Just a direct, even greeting. Lily said nothing further. She looked back at her book. Nathan watched Kara's face for a reaction, a flash of discouragement, a recalibration of expectation, a flinch. There was none. She simply turned back to Nathan with a small, composed smile, as if a 6-year-old choosing not to engage was a perfectly natural occurrence that required no special response. He offered her coffee. She accepted. Black, no sugar, which he noted. They sat at the kitchen table. The formal interview lasted 40 minutes. What Nathan was actually doing was watching the way she answered questions, the moments she paused, the things she chose to include and the things she chose to leave out, the calibration of her honesty. He was not testing for deception. He did not believe she was lying to him. He was testing for the quality of her self-knowledge. She passed by his assessment without difficulty. At one point, near the end, when they had covered the practical territory and the conversation had settled into something slightly less structured, she looked at him and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead," he said. "The people you spoke to and my references, did any of them say anything that gave you pause?" He looked at her for a moment. "No," he said truthfully. "They spoke well of you, consistently." She nodded. Something moved through her expression. Not relief exactly, but a kind of settling, a small adjustment of a weight she'd been carrying. "I ask because I know my resume has some gaps in it. I left a job a few years ago under circumstances I can't talk about in detail. I wanted to be upfront about that." Nathan held the pause for a beat longer than was strictly comfortable. "I appreciate that," he said. "I don't want to start somewhere new and have something from my past become a problem later. I'd rather you know there's something I can't explain and decide from there." He looked at her. She looked back at him steady. "That takes a particular kind of courage," he said. "Telling someone there's something you can't tell them." She almost smiled at that. "Or it's just the only honest thing I can think of to do." He told her he would be in touch by Monday. She thanked him, collected her bag, and moved toward the door, and as she passed the living room she glanced in. A natural glance, not a performed one. And Lily was still on the couch, still nominally reading. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Lily looked away first. Kara said nothing. She walked out. Nathan stood in the hallway and listened to her car start and pull away, and then he looked at the ceiling for a moment with the expression he wore when he was completing a calculation. Then he walked into the living room and sat in the armchair across from his daughter. "Well?" he said. Lily turned a page. "She didn't try to make me like her." Nathan waited. "Most of them try," Lily said. "They do the voice, or they make a big deal about my book." She paused. "She didn't do any of that." "Is that good or bad?" he asked, though he already knew. Lily looked up at him over the top of her book with an expression that communicated, with considerable eloquence, that she considered the question beneath him. "It means she's not pretending," she said. She went back to reading. Nathan sat with that for a moment. Then he got up, went to his office, and sent the email. Kara Simmons started the following Monday. What none of them knew, Not Nathan. Not Kara. Not even Lily with her extraordinary perceptiveness. Was that the moment Kara walked through that door, a sequence had begun that would eventually expose a truth none of them had been looking for, and that the exposure would come not through Nathan's careful investigation or Kara's guarded honesty, but through a small girl who had decided, in the careful and private way she made all her decisions, to watch very closely and say nothing. Not yet. The thread had been pulled. What unraveled next, none of them were ready for. Kara Simmons had learned in the first 2 weeks at the Hale house several things that no job listing had prepared her for. The first was that Lily kept a schedule more rigorous than most adults she had known. Breakfast at 7:15 precisely, homework at 4, not 4:10. Books arranged by a system that appeared alphabetical but was, Kara eventually realized, organized by emotional weight. The ones that had made Lily cry were on the top shelf. Spines turned inward. She had not mentioned this to Nathan. It felt like something she was not supposed to have noticed. The second was that Lily did not ignore her. Ignoring someone required a decision not to look, an active turning away. What Lily did was something different. She observed, completely from whatever distance she had established as safe, and processed what she saw with the patience of someone who knew that conclusions drawn too quickly could be used against you. Kara recognized this because she had once done exactly the same thing. She did not tell Lily this. She said almost nothing. Those first 2 weeks, that wasn't directly practical. She learned Lily's schedule and kept it without error. She packed lunches that were neither too elaborate nor too plain. She drove to Columbus Academy in the mornings in her own car, a 10-year-old Honda that she had once been embarrassed about and had now simply made peace with. And she was always there when the doors opened at 3:30. Always 5 minutes early, which Lily noted without comment. On the 9th day, something happened that Kara had not anticipated. It was a Wednesday after school. Lily was doing homework at the kitchen island, and Kara was making the afternoon snack, apple slices and peanut butter per the protocol Nathan had established, and the kitchen was quiet in the particular way it got when Lily was concentrating. A silence that had texture and weight. Kara set the plate down at Lily's elbow without interrupting, the way she had learned to do. She turned back to the counter. "You cut them different," Lily said. Kara turned around. Lily was looking at the apple slices without looking up from her worksheet. "Different from what?" Kara asked. "Margaret cut them in wedges. Patricia cut them in rounds." A pause. "You cut them in fans." Kara looked at the plate. She had, in fact, fanned the slices in a half circle around the small bowl of peanut butter out of nothing more than habit. "Does that bother you?" she asked. Lily considered this for a moment with what appeared to be genuine intellectual effort. "No," she said finally. She went back to her worksheet. Kara went back to the counter. But something had shifted, not dramatically, not in any way she could have pointed to, just the faintest, almost imperceptible reduction in the distance Lily had established. She filed it away and said nothing. Nathan watched all of this from the edges. He watched the way Kara moved through the house, efficient, quiet, leaving no residue of herself in rooms she'd been in, like someone long practiced in not taking up too much space. He watched Lily watching Kara. He had expected, given his daughter's history, some form of escalation by now. The perfectly timed oversight, the miscommunication engineered to look like innocence. It hadn't come. He wasn't sure whether this meant Lily had accepted Kara on some level, or simply that she was gathering information before deciding on a strategy. He was, he realized, doing the same thing. The investigation into Daniel Reeves had progressed in the quiet, careful way Nathan conducted all investigations. No noise, no confrontation, no telegraphing of intent. He had contacted 2 people he trusted, a forensic accountant named Wallace and a former attorney who owed Nathan a significant favor. He had asked for specific things and had not explained why. What he had so far was partial but suggestive. 3 years ago, Kara had been earning $38,000 as an executive assistant at Meridian. Precise, discreet, reliable, by all accounts. Then something had happened in October of that year, and she had left within a week, and the NDA and settlement had followed within 30 days, and she had vanished into a different name at the same address and eventually emerged, 8 months later, as a waitress across town. The sealed settlement meant Nathan could not access its contents directly, but he could access peripheral things, emails Reeves had sent during that period, preserved in unrelated litigation, testimony from 2 former Meridian employees, the pattern of Reeves's trajectory afterward, a sudden departure from Meridian, a year of inactivity, then his emergence at Forefront Capital. He did not share any of this with Kara. He did not know yet what he would do with it. He knew only that he was building something, with the same methodical care he brought to everything, and that when it was complete, he would have to decide what it meant. For Reeves, for Kara, and for a question he had not yet allowed himself to name directly. On a Friday evening in mid-May, Nathan came home earlier than expected. A meeting had ended 40 minutes ahead of schedule, which almost never happened, and found Kara in the living room. She was sitting on the floor. Lily was sitting on the couch directly above her with a book. They were not interacting, not in any visible way. But Kara had a book too, a paperback she had apparently brought from home, worn at the spine. And they were reading in parallel, Lily on the couch and Kara on the floor, in the same circle of lamplight, in the same quality of silence. Nathan stood in the hallway and did not announce himself for a moment. He watched his daughter's face, the careful, composed face she wore, and he saw in the set of her jaw and the angle of her eyes something that was not quite comfort, but was the layer just beneath it. The layer that came before comfort. The layer that said, "I have not decided yet, but I am still here. And I have not left." He made a sound in the hallway. Both of them looked up. Lily's expression reset immediately to its neutral register. Kara stood, putting her book aside. "You're back early," Kara said. "Meeting ended," he said. "Lily's had dinner. I made pasta. There's some left if you want it." He looked at his daughter. Lily was watching him with the particular look she used when she was checking whether he had noticed what she wanted him to have noticed. He nodded at her, the small nod they used for things that didn't need words. She looked back at her book. Nathan went to the kitchen. He found the pasta. He stood at the counter and ate it cold, because he did not feel like waiting for it to heat, and he looked out the window at the backyard in the May evening light, and he thought about the distance between where things were and where they might be going. He had not expected to feel anything in particular about Kara Simmons. He had expected to use what he found, to act, to correct, to pursue justice in the efficient and impersonal way he usually did. He had not expected to come home early from a meeting and find her sitting on the floor of his living room reading beside his daughter, and to feel somewhere beneath the calculation and the caution and the decade-long discipline of keeping the inside of himself very separate from what showed on the surface. Something that complicated everything. He put the bowl in the sink. He washed it. He dried it. He did not examine the feeling further, because there were things it was not yet time to examine. What he did not know was that upstairs, in her room, Lily was lying on her bed with Chester tucked under her arm, staring at the ceiling, going through everything she had collected in the past 2 weeks the way a scientist goes through data, sorting, categorizing, testing hypotheses. She had not yet reached a conclusion, but she was getting closer, and she had noticed with the attention she gave to everything, that her father had come home early. She had also noticed the way he had looked at the living room before he said anything. She filed it away. She said nothing. Not yet. The test came on a Tuesday in early June, and it was the most deliberate thing Lily had done since Kara's arrival. It began simply enough. Lily told Kara on Monday evening that she had a project due Friday, a diorama for her history class depicting daily life in colonial America. The materials required, she explained, were specific: balsa wood, acrylic paints in 4 particular colors, miniature clay figures that could only be purchased at a craft store in Grandview. She handed Kara a handwritten list with the careful penmanship she used for things she wanted taken seriously. Kara studied the list. "I can take you Wednesday after school," she said. "Wednesday is my piano lesson," Lily said. "Thursday?" "Dentist." Kara looked at the list again. That leaves tomorrow or Friday. Friday is when it's due, Lily said, with the patience of someone explaining something to a person who was trying very hard but still wasn't quite getting it. Tomorrow then, Kara said. What Kara did not know, what she had no way of knowing, was that the craft store in Grandview that Lily had specified had closed 4 months ago. It had been replaced by a smoothie franchise. Lily knew this because she had looked it up specifically and recently, with the thoroughness she applied to all her preparations. The plan, as Lily had constructed it, was elegant in its simplicity. Kara would drive to Grandview, find the store gone, have no alternative location for the materials, return empty-handed, and be unable to complete the task she had been given. The project would be late, or Lily would have to tell her father that Kara had failed. Either outcome was acceptable. What actually happened was this. Kara drove to Grandview. She found the smoothie franchise. She sat in her car for a moment, then she pulled out her phone and searched for the craft store's name, found the notice of its closure, and a brief article mentioning that its owner, a woman named Gloria Hatch, had opened a smaller home-based operation in Clintonville. She found the address. She texted it to herself. She drove to Clintonville. The home-based operation turned out to be a converted garage that smelled of sawdust and paint thinner and contained, in its meticulously organized shelving, every item on Lily's list. Kara bought them all. She was back at the Hale house by 4:15. Lily was sitting at the kitchen island when she walked in, waiting with the particular stillness of someone expecting a specific result. Kara set the bag on the counter. The Grandview store closed, she said. The owner moved the operation to Clintonville. I found her. She began taking items out of the bag, one by one. Balsa wood, the 4 colors you asked for, and I got 2 sizes of clay figures because the list didn't specify, so I thought you could choose. Lily looked at the items. Then she looked at Kara. The Grandview store closed 4 months ago, she said. Yes, Kara said. A silence. How did you find the other place? Lily asked. I looked, Kara said simply. Lily looked at the materials for a long moment. Her expression was doing something complicated. A recalculation happening in real time. Adjustments being made to a model that had just received unexpected data. Okay, she said finally. She picked up the balsa wood and examined it. She said nothing further. Kara did not say, I know what you did. She did not say, I'm not going to fail your tests. She did not say anything at all that acknowledged what had just passed between them, because she understood, with the instinct of someone who had once been a child learning to protect herself in a world that kept changing the rules, that naming it would ruin it. She made the afternoon snack. She put it on the counter. She left the kitchen. That evening, Nathan came home to find Lily at the kitchen table working on her diorama with the careful focus she brought to things that mattered to her. He sat across from her and watched for a moment. How'd you get the materials? He asked. Kara found them, Lily said without looking up. He waited for more. There was none. Later, when Lily was in bed, he found Kara in the kitchen cleaning up. She told me you sourced the project materials, he said. The store she asked me to go to had closed, Kara said. I know, he said. It's been closed since February. A beat. You knew she sent you to a closed store, he said. I suspected, Kara said. And you just found another way. That's the job, she said. He looked at her for a moment. She was rinsing a glass with the same careful attention she gave everything. Not looking up, not performing humility or strength, simply doing what she was doing with the quality of someone who has stopped needing to be seen doing it correctly and has only the doing left. He thought about what it took to be tested the way she had been and still show up this way. He thought about what he knew that she did not know he knew. He said none of this. Thank you, he said instead. She looked up. There was something in her expression that was not quite surprise but was adjacent to it, the look of someone thanked for something they hadn't expected. You're welcome, she said, and went back to the glass. He went to his office. He opened his laptop. He looked at what Wallace had sent. The picture was almost complete, and what it showed was worse than he had imagined. Reeves had not simply done something wrong to Kara 3 years ago. He had spent the intervening years carefully ensuring she could never speak about it, through the NDA, but also through pressure Wallace had traced in financial records and communications Reeves had believed were secure. He had manipulated her professional references, kept her options in her actual field closed. The years as a waitress were not just trauma's aftermath. They were the result of an active campaign to keep her there. And Reeves was now being considered for a seat on Nathan's own advisory board. Nathan sat with this for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Marcus. "I need you to prepare something," he said. "A complete and properly authenticated documentation package. Everything Wallace found plus the supplemental materials from the attorney. Format it for both legal and board presentation." "Timeline?" Marcus asked. 10 days, Nathan said. He hung up. He sat in the quiet of his office. Down the hall, his daughter was asleep with Chester under her arm. Downstairs, he had heard Kara's car start and pull away 10 minutes ago. She was not a live-in nanny. Had her own apartment, her own life that she returned to each evening, and the house was still. He thought about a woman who had rebuilt herself from nothing in silence, without anyone watching. He thought about the thing it took to do that. He thought about what she didn't know was coming. He thought about his daughter sitting at the kitchen table, bent over a diorama of colonial America, saying only, "Kara found them." The feeling he had not examined came back. This time, he did not push it away. He sat with it. He let it be what it was. And then he opened the document Wallace had sent and went back to work. We've made it to the final chapter, and I have to tell you, what happens here broke me a little when I thought it through. Before you read it, hit that like button and subscribe, because this kind of story deserves to be found by people who need it. Here we go. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday in late June, 3 weeks after Nathan had given Marcus his instructions. In those 3 weeks, several things had happened simultaneously, like instruments converging on a single note. Nathan had completed his documentation. It was thorough, precise, unassailable. Every claim sourced, every source verified. No gaps, no inferences presented as facts. 11 years of working with Wallace had produced exactly this kind of file. The kind that, placed in front of the right people, left no room for interpretation. Lily had finished her diorama. It had received an A. She had told Nathan about the grade with the particular economy she used for achievements she considered expected rather than exceptional, and he had told her he was proud of her. And she had looked at him in the way she looked at him when she was checking whether he meant it, and apparently concluded that he did, because she went back to her book without further comment. And somewhere in those same 3 weeks, in the space between the afternoon snack and the drive to school and the quiet parallel reading in the lamplight, something had shifted between Lily and Kara. It had not happened with announcement. There was no moment Nathan could point to and say, "There, that was it." It was more like the change in a room when someone opens a window in early summer, gradual, atmospheric, felt in the quality of the air before it was felt anywhere else. He had noticed it first in the mornings. Lily, who had always been a child of careful routines and careful distances, began appearing in the kitchen before Kara arrived, not waiting exactly, but present in a way that was different from her usual morning self-containment. She would be at the counter with her cereal, or at the island with a library book, and when the sound of Kara's car came up the drive, something in her posture would shift almost imperceptibly, the way a plant turns toward light before it appears to have made a choice. He had noticed it next in a specific exchange on a Wednesday evening in mid-June. He had been in his office when he heard Lily's voice from downstairs, not the controlled, measured voice she used for most interactions, but a different register, higher, less managed. He had stood and moved toward the door and then stopped, because something told him not to interrupt. What he heard, from the hallway was this. Lily's voice. "She left because of me, didn't she?" A pause. Kara's voice, very quiet. "Who?" "My mom." Another pause, longer. Nathan stood absolutely still. Kara's voice. "I don't know your mom, so I can't answer that. But that's what happens when kids are hard to be around. People leave. A silence that lasted long enough that Nathan had moved 2 steps toward the stairs before he heard Kara's voice again. Still quiet. Still even. The people who leave because things are hard, they were going to leave anyway. The hard things are just the excuse they use. That's not about you. Lily, that has never been about you. Another silence. Lily's voice, very small, stripped of everything she usually kept on it. How do you know? Because I've been left too, Kara said. And I spent a long time thinking it was about something I'd done. It wasn't. It was about them. Nathan had stood in the hallway with his hand on the wall for a long moment. Then he had gone back to his office and sat down and looked at the ceiling, and felt something move through him that was not quite grief, and not quite gratitude, and was, perhaps, simply the feeling of watching something true be said to someone who needed to hear it. He had not told Kara about that conversation. She didn't know he had heard it. He suspected she would have said the same things regardless. That was one of the things he knew about her now, after 2 months. She didn't adjust what she said based on who was watching. The Thursday board meeting arrived. Nathan had arranged it carefully. The advisory board nomination for Daniel Reeves was the 3rd item on the agenda. Before the meeting, Nathan had personally delivered copies of the documentation package to the 3 board members he trusted most, along with a brief and precise summary of what they contained and what he was asking them to consider. He had not grandstanded. He had not moralized. He had simply put the evidence in front of people capable of understanding it and trusted them to arrive at the same conclusions he had. Reeves arrived at the meeting unaware of any of this. He shook hands. He made small talk. He was the kind of man who was very good at both. When the 3rd agenda item was reached, Nathan's chairman, a woman named Eloise Barnard, 71 years old, with the patience of granite and the precision of a scalpel, looked at the room and said, quietly, that before they proceeded to the vote, there were some materials the board needed to review. Nathan watched Daniel Reeves's face as the documents were distributed. He watched him read the first page. He watched him look up. He watched him look across the table at Nathan. Nathan held his gaze. He said nothing. His expression was the one he had spent 15 years perfecting, neutral, complete, giving nothing away. Reeves looked back down. His face had done what faces do when they understand that something they believed was buried has been fully excavated. The meeting took 4 hours. Reeves's nomination was withdrawn by unanimous consent. A referral was made to the appropriate regulatory bodies. 3 investments were flagged for independent audit. A separate legal process began moving toward Kara Simmons and the sealed settlement that had kept her silence for 3 years. Nathan drove home in the May evening. It was still light, the kind of long June evening that felt like the world was trying to hold on to itself, and he sat in the Volvo in the driveway for a moment before going in. He had expected to feel the particular clean satisfaction of a completed operation, the sensation he usually felt when something he had built achieved exactly what it was designed to achieve. He did feel that, but there was something else underneath it, something with more texture, something that had to do with a woman who didn't know yet that the thing that had been done to her was about to be undone, at least in part, and a girl who had sat in a kitchen 3 years ago and asked whether it was her fault, and had been told by someone with no obligation to tell her anything that it wasn't. He went inside. Lily was at the kitchen island with her homework. Kara was at the stove making something that smelled like the chicken soup she had made twice before. Lily had eaten 2 bowls each time, which for Lily constituted an unambiguous endorsement. They both looked up when he came in. "Early?" Kara said. "On time," he said. Meeting ended when it was supposed to. Lily looked at him in the way she looked at him when she wanted to know if something had happened without asking directly. He looked back at her and gave the small nod. She nodded once in return and went back to her homework. He sat on the other stool at the island. Kara was stirring the soup. The kitchen was warm and smelled of thyme and the particular richness of a stock that had been going since morning, and Lily was working through a long division problem with the focused calm she brought to mathematics. And Nathan watched the 2 of them, his daughter and this woman who had come into their lives through a sequence of events that he still found, when he thought about it, almost impossibly precise. And he thought about the difference between a life that is arranged and a life that is built. He had arranged many things. He had been good at it. But some of the most important things that had happened to him had not been arranged by anyone. "Kara," he said. She looked over her shoulder from the stove. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "When you have a few minutes." She studied his face for a moment with the same attention she brought to everything. "Okay," she said. He told her after Lily was in bed. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where her interview had taken place 3 months ago, and he told her, carefully and completely, what he had found and what he had done. He told her about Marcus and Wallace and the documentation package. He told her about the board meeting. He told her that the sealed settlement was likely to be revisited and that she should have an attorney, and that he knew one who would take the case and would be good. He told her that he was sorry it had taken 3 years for any of this to happen. She sat across from him and listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the June night had fully arrived. Dark, warm, the sound of a few insects, the distant soft noise of the neighborhood settling. She looked at the table. Then she looked at him. "You've known since before you hired me," she said. "I suspected some of it. The full picture took longer. Why didn't you tell me?" Not accusatory, genuinely asking. Because what happened to you was yours to do something with, or not. I didn't want to make that decision for you. I wanted to build something that if you chose to act, you could use. And if you didn't choose to act, at least Reeves wouldn't move into a position where he could do it to someone else. She looked at him for a long time. He let her look. "That's either the most thoughtful thing anyone has ever done for me," she said quietly, "or the most presumptuous." "It might be both," he said. Something moved across her face. Not a smile exactly, but the thing that comes just before one, when the decision to let it happen is still being made. "I'll call the attorney," she said. "Good." A silence. Not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that exists between people who have run out of the things that were the most important to say, and are now in the quieter territory on the other side. "Nathan," she said. He waited. "The night Lily asked me if her mother left because of her..." She paused. "Did you hear that?" He met her eyes. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "She needed to hear it," she said. "I hope I said it right." "You said it exactly right," he said. The thing on her face completed itself. It was a smile, finally. Not performed, not managed, simply the thing that happens when someone has been carrying something heavy for a long time and is permitted for a moment to put it down. Upstairs, in her room, Lily was not asleep. She was lying on her back with Chester held against her chest, looking at the ceiling, listening to the low murmur of voices from downstairs. Not the words, just the sound. The particular rhythm of two people in a kitchen at night who are not in a hurry to stop talking. She had been conducting a final review of everything she had observed in 3 months. She was nothing if not thorough. The conclusions. Kara did not lie. She had watched for this with care. Liars always showed themselves in the small things. And Kara had been consistent without exception. Kara did not perform. She did not do the voice. She did not make a bigger deal of Lily than Lily was, which most adults did because they thought children needed that. Kara had driven to Clintonville and found a woman named Gloria in a converted garage and brought back everything on the list, because the list hadn't specified sizes and she planned ahead. Kara had told her the people who leave are going to leave regardless, and that it had never been about Lily. And she had said it the way people say things they believe, not the way they say things they think you need to hear. And Kara was, right now, in the kitchen with her father, talking in the low voices that Lily recognized, the kind of voices that meant something real was being said. Lily was 6 years old. She was old enough to understand that there was a difference between the people who came and went and the people who stayed. She was old enough to know that she could not make someone stay. She was old enough to know that the only honest way to find out if someone was the second kind was to wait and watch. And she had waited and she had watched, and she had her answer. She pulled Chester a little closer. She closed her eyes. In the morning, she decided, She would tell Kara that she had liked the fans, the way she had cut the apples, on that first Wednesday, into fans around the peanut butter bowl. She had never said so. She would say so tomorrow. It was a small thing, but Lily understood in the way she understood most important things, that the small things were where all of it lived. Downstairs, the voices continued for a while longer, unhurried, warm, punctuated by silences that were not empty but full. Two people learning the particular language that forms between people who have been careful with each other for long enough, that the carefulness has become something else entirely. Outside, the June night held everything it held, the neighborhood and the stars and the long ordinary miracle of a Tuesday becoming a Wednesday, without anyone noticing the exact moment of change.